Max Vaughn here, author of Faer. Today we're going to talk about the four legs of a writer. It's a concept that I follow and I recommend to people. It's something I found works well for me, and it's kind of a full immersion approach where you're not just writing, but you're doing other things to really accelerate your learning and your writing capabilities and your productivity. So let's just take a quick look at what the four main points of that are. Obviously, writing, reading, editing, and learning. And by learning, I mean continuing education. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about writing. Dreaming is an important part of that process. Hopefully, we all do it. It's how the story lurks in the back of your mind, the impulse to get it going. And don't be afraid to explore that and dream it up. I mean, that's ground zero. You're not doing nothing when you're doing it. You're doing a very important part of the process. The planning phase of what you're doing is important too. Some writers like to be discovery writers and kind of just make it up as they go along, and that's fine. But quite often you'll find that doing some level of outlining and planning can really help, especially with three-act structure, knowing when you're introducing the setup, the complication, and the resolution. It helps for pacing and things like that to have some idea about structure. I'm going to do a separate video on how I do it, and I'll get a little bit deeper into that topic there. Also, you can check out Brandon Sanderson on plot. He's got some great lectures on that subject, and really kind of goes in deep on the difference between gardening and architect. And like I said, most people are going to fall in some spectrum between the two. I know I certainly do. The actual writing part, obviously, that's important. You want to spend some kind of minimum amount every day if you can. If you're in a situation where you can't do that every day, that makes it tough. But you either set a word count or a time spent that you can kind of anchor to every day and know that you're making steady progress. I find that I have a limited amount of time that I can actually spend writing, so that's when I do some of these other things. Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about reading. This is really important because it gives you a chance to learn your genre. If you're a thriller writer, for example, you might want to check out the work of James Patterson, David Baldacci. Those guys are just incredibly successful in those genres. I think James Patterson's worth like $500 million or something. So if you want to be successful in a particular genre, it's important to kind of know how people are writing it. Obviously, I'm a fantasy writer, and I really get inspired by people like George R. R. Martin. When I read his stuff, it's just incredible. I always get inspired by it. I find little bits and pieces of technique. His work is so vivid. If you read passages from him, without getting too deep into this, but just the way he'll describe someone going up a side of a mountain or something, it's just incredible. And so it's important that you're constantly refreshing your mind and you're taking in input in your field, because this is what you do, and you want to constantly stimulate your brain on how to write, and reading is just such an important part of that. Don't ever lose that. It helps you stay current on market trends too, which I think is important. Look at the bookshelves, what's selling. If you want to plug into that, not every decision you're going to make is going to be commercial. I kind of don't really follow a commercial format so much, and I may pay a price for that. Who knows? We'll see. But that's a conscious choice that you should make. But you should know what the market supports as you're making that decision. Okay, let's move on. Editing might surprise you as being on this list, but this is actually something you can do, and I've become a huge fan of it. I participate in a site called critiquematch.com. I'm going to do a separate video on that, so I'm not going to get too deep here, but it allows you to beta read for other writers and help edit their work, and that's just a great way to learn. Helping other people solve the problems of writing will give you good insights into how to solve your own problems. And after a while, if you do enough of it, I think I'm almost at 1 million words edited on Critique Match. You start to get a pretty good feel for technical errors, and that really helps and will facilitate your writing, for yourself. So the other great thing is that it'll broaden your scope and your viewpoint on writing because you'll see how other people are doing things. And typically those are going to be different from yourself. So it always helps to get some outside perspective there. But I'd say editing is a very important leg of writing because it will definitely help increase your skill level. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about learning a little bit. And this is one I kind of sense when I'm doing my work on critique matches. Sometimes I make a lot of suggestions for things that people might read to help their writing. And I always feel like I get a lot of resistance to it, and I don't quite understand that because it's nothing better than getting a book on technique or something to show you how to do things better and sharpen your skills. It's the fastest path, actually, other than just rewriting, to actually improving, because you'll learn so much faster. I think I was able to kind of compress a long period of evolutionary growth in a much shorter space of time because I just really went at it. I just read as many technique books as I possibly could. Let's say my first year of writing Faer, the writing wasn't that great, and I got some negative feedback, and I really just went back to the basics and read as much technique as I could, did as much editing as I could, and it really helped. And that stuff starts to click after a while, and you really pick it up. Sometimes when you read a technique book, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of get what they're saying. Maybe I'll try to do a little more of that. And then as you pay more attention to it as time goes on, you realize, oh yeah, they really knew what they were talking about. Maybe getting that super tight point of view. There's certain things you can do to tighten up your point of view, like leave the pronouns out. Marcy Kennedy has a great book called Deep Point of View, and I recommend that to everybody. It's another book of hers is Description, which sounds really kind of bland, but I felt like I needed help with that. And then that book was just a treasure trove of ideas on how to set moods with description and other great things like that. So I can't recommend it high enough. And that continuation of learning is something that you should take very, very seriously. You can only spend so many hours in a day writing, and so for that other time that you might be able to pick up, you might want to just stick your nose in a book. The other way to do it too is you can. Brandon Sanderson has this amazing lecture series, which I linked to on writerswiki.com under channels, and you can just watch all of the Brandon Sanderson videos. I'm certainly doing that. I can't get enough of his work. His lectures are just incredible. It's a way of immersing yourself in writing. You don't want to just do one thing, which is sit there and write in a bubble, because you're not getting feedback and you're not learning. You're not getting outside input, and you really need that. Can't recommend that enough. I wrote a 750-page novel, which I ended up not being able to use because I wasn't deep enough into continued learning, and I wasn't getting enough feedback, and I really didn't know what I was doing wrong. And then when I discovered that, it took time for me to learn those skills on how to correct things like point of view, and that was a big one for me. Kind of life-changing when I figured out how to do that properly. So can't recommend learning high enough, and there's a lot of resources out there. They're inexpensive. I think if I added up everything I spent on technique books, it'd probably be a couple $100. That's not much for supporting money-making skill. So don't leave this part out. And that's going to do it. That's what I consider the four legs of being a writer. It's writing, reading, editing, and continued learning. And those will serve you well. And you want to make sure that you got your legs down on each one of those foundations, because that's really going to help you in the long run. And that's going to do it for this video. Hope you like it. I hope you subscribe, and see you in the next video.